July the 26th at 4:30 p.m. We'll do a quick roll call. Alder Johnson?
Here.
Alder Burnett?
Here.
Alder Hutchinson?
Here.
I see also we have Alder Stoyer, Alder Grant, and I think I don't see any other alders.
Alder Eck. Alder Eck.
All right, and Alder Eck is also here. So I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Move to approve.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. I'll entertain a motion on the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor say
Aye.
Aye.
aye, and that passes unanimously. Let me see. On the regular business, item 1, consideration with possible action on the request to fill the following replacement positions and all subsequent vacancies resulting from internal transfers. We'll take them letter by letter.
Hello, my name is Joan from the Restaurant on Hobby Lobby. I'm calling.
Okay. Item A, parking enforcement officer. There's 2 from Public Works. Does anyone have any questions for
Move to approve.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Item B, an operator 1 for tractor, Public Works. Again, does anyone have any questions for Director Grenier?
Approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed? And that passes unanimously. Item C, programmer analyst, information technology. Does anyone have any questions for Director Ronick?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed say nay. And that passes unanimously. On to the last item, item D, diversity inclusion coordinator out of human resources, and Alder Burnett.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Director Faulds, for the sake of, remembering what happened when this position was approved. It was approved during the 2019 budget process for the year 2020. I believe we voted to approve to fill the position in like April or May. And then from April and May, it took a few months to fill the position. I think it was hired around November of 2020. And it was a controversial vote. I think that, I shouldn't say controversial, it was a close vote. A lot of members of the council were not sure why the position was needed. And so, the person who just left the position was in that role for a year and a half, roughly. Could you let us know, what were the major accomplishments? What are some of the good things that came from the position? And I'll preface that with saying that, salary, benefits, everything included for the last year and a half or so, you're looking at well over $100,000 of city tax dollars because it's not revenue generating. Like, can you assure us what was accomplished in the last year and a half in that position?
Sure. And it's also in the middle of COVID too. So it's kind of a tough position to fill with that. And a tough role to fill because I think there's a lot of face-to-face contact they need to have to make it work pretty well. So I think the biggest thing was the D&I strategic plan was put in place. There's also the Equal Rights Commission. There was a lot of work with them, to schedule the meetings, research for them, projects. There's a lot of research for our employee resource groups that the person accomplished. And I think just developing relationships with the community. Those I think were the big accomplishments for the position. And then I think one other one was to help with our recruitment and retention with just different policies to make sure that we were being inclusive in finding the right candidate for the positions. Those would be the big, I think, accomplishments that they accomplished throughout the year.
How many employee resource groups do we currently have?
Right now, we don't have any. I think we approved that in 2018. It takes time. And we talked to Schreiber Foods, and they said it took them over, I think it was like 4 to 5 years since they had a policy to actually form one group, and we've only had it for about. What the D&I coordinator did was updated our policies, kind of fine-tune the process to have a group get started. And really, I think what we're missing is kind of an employee to step forward and start the first one and get the ball rolling. We do have the PRI group and PD, which I believe really acts and kind of operates like a ERG, but has not filled out the formal paperwork. So that's really only the difference with that one.
The ERGs were approved during 2019, just for the sake of new members. I mean, could we retool this job description? I voted against filling the position, partly because we could, do a lot of this through now with the Equal Rights Commission that has formed, that is a volunteer body. And I think that some of the more community-facing things that volunteer board could do, and some of the more strategic, purposeful things, I think that each director within the city of Green Bay could incorporate that within their department policies. Would you agree with that?
I guess yes and no. I think the role of the D&I coordinator is really to meet with employees and kind of get a feel for how they are interacting with other coworkers, with departments. I think the role of the D&I coordinator is to meet with supervisors and directors and help them create inclusive policies and make sure that what we're doing is, creating a work environment that's inclusive, that will help retain. Also, D&I coordinator is going to really help us create a better recruiting effort or marketing effort to attract new candidates. So I think there's a lot of internal work that directors and HR department cannot accomplish. It takes someone with all the subject matter expert in this area to really come in and have the training and background to educate our employees on that. So I don't think it's something that directors and supervisors can just take a class and just be able to take on that internal work. But then when it comes to the external work, the Equal Rights Commission, I think, is going to be creating policies that will affect the community and also our organization to a certain extent. Different to me than a D&I coordinator that will be building up relationships with community partners that could help with services that we provide to impact the community. So ERC could do a little bit of that, but I do think internally you need that subject matter expert to really take the reins and take over this role.
Right. I hadn't really seen with the employee survey or the employee satisfaction survey. Honestly, Director Falls, I hadn't seen a whole lot of movement in this regard. In fact, I think one of the scores might have gone in the wrong direction. And so I'm just trying to justify, with benefits, fringes, and salary, close to $100,000 of salary for the position, with, in my opinion, not a whole lot of negligible change, at least from what the data shows. So what I'd like to do is make a motion to ask the HR department to job description and present to the city council during the 2023 budget process for consideration.
I guess, is there any direction on how you want that revised or how you want that to look?
Yeah, I mean, something that's a little more targeted. If part of the job description is to work on ERGs and the employee in the position hadn't start a single ERG, then we need to look if that's a necessity or that needs to be retooled. Now with the Equal Rights Commission that has been formed, that was not in existence when we approved the position during the 2019 budget. So there are several things, and the Personnel Committee can kind of direct some of that discussion too. So, I mean, there's a motion on the floor, hasn't been seconded yet. I can get into more details if necessary.
Yeah, maybe just a point of information, Alder Burnett, if you could maybe just further clarify, are you looking to just refer this back to staff to presented until the budget, or are you looking to just refer to staff, have them retool it and bring it back at our next meeting?
Both. I think with the amount of work and strategic priorities we have, I think that gives them 2 or 3 months to work. I don't think there is anything major that's going to happen that's going to require us to a few months, but we can wait. So both.
I'll second for the sake of discussion, but I maybe want to raise my hand in the queue then, Alder Galvin.
Director Falls?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, we have, this is a position that was approved a couple years ago that we talked about. So we approved it, and then like Alder Burnett said, it was kind of approved again in the 2020 budget, I believe, and then we filled it. So since there's a position we've filled before as part of the budget, we have advertised it and posted it, and we've already had about 17 candidates, which is somewhat surprising in the sense of how difficult it is to recruit and retain employees. So there is interest out there for this position, and I do think there are qualified people to fill the role as it is right now.
Okay.
Alder Johnson?
Yeah, and actually, and again, I second it for the sake of discussion, but I am going to make an amendment and just strike move to amend to strike the 2023 budget clause of that motion. And the reason I say that is because, every position that we bring before us has the ability to be talked about through this process that we're having right now or during the budget process. So I don't think that it's necessarily required within the motion. So I guess that's why I'm just saying if we refer back to the staff, get further dialogue, but I don't think it needs to be hinged.
That needs a second, I
I'll
think.
second to refer to staff.
Okay.
Okay. And
And if I could just maybe further espouse on that, Alder Galvin. This was, I reviewed the position description, and I'm kind of okay with us just taking a second look at this, given the sensitive nature of it and some of the discussion, that occurred around it. I think oftentimes there's this belief that government has to solve every problem. And certainly, in many instances, I think government's oftentimes the least qualified to solve some of these problems. But I've also kind of warmed up to some of the responsibilities and positions since the last time we debated it, recognizing that we have to look at this through the eyes of an employer. And I think that there are a number of things within the position description that do make a lot of sense to me if we want to position ourselves as an attractive employer, particularly in a tight labor market. But there were also some things that, that I didn't really see done last time. So maybe Director Falls, if I could just ask, who does this position report to?
It reports to the Chief of Operations. It reports to me.
Okay. And so maybe I'll just share this then with you, Chief Falls. What do we call you now? Chief Falls?
That
is
works.
appropriate?
Director, Chief, Joe.
Okay.
Whatever.
One of the responsibilities I saw in there was to build strong working relationships with elected officials. And in the year and a half that role existed, I had never met this individual. In fact, for all intents and purposes, I could say that I didn't even know the position existed at City Hall. And so I think it's just a missed opportunity, because we're sort of a conduit, if you will, to our respective constituencies. And I think it's really important for most of our positions at City Hall to have some type of relationship with the alders. That's just one piece. There are a few other things in there. We had a little bit of a discussion and debate when this position was first approved about to what extent should this role be outward facing versus inward facing. And I think I'd like to maybe see a little bit more clarity around that particular point, because that goes back to my comment that government can't fix everything. And sometimes I believe that there are, nonprofit or private organizations that are better positioned to address some of the needs and concerns in our community. But if we're looking at this through the eyes of an employer, I certainly see the value and I get it. And I think we need to do a better job there to recruit a diverse body of talent. So I'm all for maybe just taking a look at some of those questions, tightening that up and but I'd rather see it brought back to the next meeting rather than waiting for the budget process.
All right. And Alder Hutchinson?
Thank you. I agree with what Alder Johnson just said. I think Equal Rights Commission has been mentioned. I think their role is totally different from someone working within the organization to work with department heads to get things going. I'm a new alder, so I did not have the opportunity to meet the person, and this position should be a focal point and meet people and get around. But I believe it's crucial to have someone in this position. If we don't have this, then we, in a sense, fall from being a up-and-coming large municipal being, and one more chip, we go down. Because we need all kinds of diversity within this city, working with the city, helping define what the problems are. And by removing this position, in a sense, diminishes that. And it actually sends a message we don't care. Even though that's not the message being presented, that's an overall message that will be sent. So I'm in favor of getting this position staffed as soon as possible, potentially with new guidance from this body. But for heaven's sake, don't do away with this position. Thank you.
I have any questions or comments? Alder Burnett?
Yeah, thank you. And then again, I'm fine with the motion. It was kind of to delay the decision until the budget, because we don't know what the budget process will look like this year. By filling the position now, then we're kind of locked into that position unless we make a difficult cut to cut the position from the table of organization at budget time. And I wanted to avoid that if possible. I'm just not, I'm, like, what is the output? It's all good that we're doing certain things. We can all agree that to have a diverse and inclusive work environment is absolutely essential. I just don't have any data or anything to justify the very large expense to the taxpayer. And so that would be my concern. And so a rework of the job description, maybe a little more targeted, a little more direction for the person that fills the position, because the employee satisfaction survey from 2009 to 2022, we didn't see a whole in a lot of these areas. And it seemed like to me that we had a rather good workforce and a good environment at City Hall in 2019. And there has been some minor increase in some areas, but a decrease in another area. And so that's my concern. How do we justify and what are the measurables the position has none? If it was a forestry position, the number of trees sown. If it was a public works position, there are things that are measured in regards to those positions. I don't really know what the outcomes of this would be to justify it. And I think we can accomplish that with the job description edit. So.
Alder Johnson.
Alder Burnett, if the amendment, which is on the table right now, if the amendment passes and it gives it back to staff and allows them to come back in a month to give us measurables, that still gives you adequate time then to contemplate whether or not this should be included in the next budget by giving us the ability to act on it next month. So are you okay with the amendment, recognizing that the timeline does add up for you to still preserve that option?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be able to vote for it. I want to have confidence that the position for the cost of the taxpayers returning what we wanted to return to the workforce. And I'm just not convinced that has happened in a year and a half. No disrespect to anybody.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Oftentimes, I shouldn't say often, occasionally there are feel-good that come before us. And I don't mean to suggest that this is one of them, but I think I would like to have the ability for staff to kind of counter that by being able to maybe, detail some outcomes and some measurables before we take a decisive action that, to Alder Hutchinson's point, could potentially take us backwards if in fact there are things that we ought to be considering that we're not seeing right now.
Okay, Alder Steuer is next, and then Alder Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Alder Johnson's amended motion. I agree that, we could wait a month on that. But I do like the point that he brought up about the fact that we need any position like this, any other positions as well, to be in touch with the alders, because I think there are times where we have citizens that ask us questions about certain positions and that, and we don't have all the information. I know it behooves us to kind of reach out and do some of that on our own, but there are some things that slip through the cracks. So I think it's important that, the positions that are out there, I think it's important for the administration to make sure that we have access to this and that we understand these positions and will be better informed, especially at budget time. Thank you.
All right, Alder Hutchinson.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on
Jim,
what's on
it's
the
hard.
table.
It's hard to hear you, Jim. Can you speak up?
Sure, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure what we're voting for on this vote. So are we voting for a delay of a month so staff can look and make a new definition for the job position, and then it will come back to us?
Yes, that's my understanding, is that we're delaying this, and I don't know if it's a month. Our next meeting, I don't know if Chief Falls could be ready by then.
Yeah, I think it's might be August 23rd, perhaps.
Well, looking at the agenda here, it looks like our next meeting for personnel would be August 9th.
Yep, and that's where we have to decide if we want to have one on the 9th and the 23rd, or maybe just the 23rd, because I think our next council meeting, I believe, is August 30th.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then the 23rd would give you more time.
Yep.
But yes, Alder Hutchinson, if this motion passes, it would be to delay the hiring of anyone until at least that time.
Okay, I'm all for getting definition and clarifying and answering questions on this point. So I would be in favor of delaying if that's what it takes.
Okay, thank you. Chief Falls?
So I know we haven't voted on this yet, but I guess it's, Alder Johnson talked about this the last time this position came up, and we had a robust discussion. Quite a few people were just kind of like, this position needs to be in the community, needs to be outward facing, needs to make a difference in community. Some people are like, needs to be internal, focus on internal policies, and some people are got to do a little bit of both. So when we say we're trying to define this position and make it more targeted, I don't really understand what that means and understand what the committee is looking for. Because so like, you're referring it back to the staff. Are we just trying to pick and choose what you think you're going to vote for? Or is there a direction on what you're looking for that you would like to see in this position so you can approve it and it can make a difference in the organization and or community?
Alder Johnson.
Yeah, Joe, how cumbersome would it be perhaps to present two options to us? One that's more internally focused and maybe one that's a blend?
I don't think that'd be too cumbersome. I think we could do that.
I think it would be useful for this dialogue for us to maybe understand how, as a body, we can maximize the investment in this resource.
Yeah, I can do that. And, we can explain more next month, but I guess how we envisioned this position was whenever you start, and the position was only here for a little bit over a year, is you're going to have to learn the internal operations and help our internal policies to meet, the definitions and compliance of being more inclusive and diverse. And then from there, you'll kind of naturally grow into working with the community and integrating our services to make sure they're inclusive with the community. So you can do a little bit of both, but that was our thought process with this position. So either way, there's going to be overlap, whether it's external facing or internal facing, there's going to be overlap.
Alder Burnett.
Yeah, thank you. And Yeah, I think that's a good option. I'll just give you an example. Again, the diversity, the inclusion, wonderful aspects of the position. I know that Green Bay has welcomed a lot of new members of our community, specifically Afghan refugees. And this is a perfect example or opportunity where mayor's office has been very supportive. The police department have been very supportive. But if this person in this role, the expectation would be for them to engage the Afghan community, the community leaders, and make people or allow people to understand their city government, who to contact, what numbers to call. Perhaps there's translators within the community that can make life easier for people who are not English speakers. Those are all, I think, wonderful opportunities. And if we attach some sort of measurables to the position, then we can say to the public, okay, with this position, this was the cost, but they engaged a diverse community group stations per year, stuff like that. I know a lot of city staff does that. We do the economic community development, wonderful, police, wonderful. But in this position, we can have more of that structure in order to engage those community groups. So that's kind of what I was looking to accomplish with the position. So.
All right, and for my 2 cents, Chief Falls, now I'm always thinking about our employees and recruiting. I mean, from what I'm reading through the material this week, that's involved with, we're always 40 positions shy. A lot of that is, some of it's just because of the process it takes to fill them, but some of these positions have been open for quite a bit of time. For an example, the police department. And again, that's my ballywhack. I've seen a lot of change in the police department, but I think we could do a lot better. I'm interested in this position as to has it had any metrics on not only the police department but city employees overall. And even if they're just advising or assisting or going to these recruiting or like Alder Burnett was talking about, educating the people out within our community, maybe bring some of them into the fold as employees. So I guess it's like it seems we're not really sure exactly what we want this job to be doing necessarily. Inward, outward, combination thereof. I mean, we do have the Equal Rights Commission. They should obviously be working with them. But I like the position. I think it's important. But I also like the comments that were made here on what the other alders are looking for. And so, yeah, I support this amendment or motion and the amendment. So without any further ado, unless there's any other comments, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay, and that passes unanimously.
Motion to refer as amended.
All those in favor?
I'll
Sorry,
second
got a
that.
second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Item number 2, request for feedback on the remote work policy with the possibility for revision. Does anyone have any questions after reading the attachments for Chief Falls? Alder Grant.
I have some questions, I guess, and more comments than anything. I did receive some feedback from city employees. And one thing I guess I just noticed on the survey itself, which I guess is slightly a question, but the questions that start the survey off with department, age, gender, race, can I ask what the purpose behind that is? Because I can tell, I guess I was a little shocked to hear that only about 300 people filled it out. And I know it's an anonymous survey, but when you look at some of the departments, there's only about 6 employees. So when you narrow down those categories, how anonymous is this survey really?
Yeah, so the purpose of, I think, any survey is to get feedback so you can actually make meaningful change to the organization or whatever you're trying to make change to. So when we get the demographics, and to be honest, we haven't broken it down and we haven't got into it this far, but you probably could break it down based on, male, female, age differences, if there's different responses. And you can see with the workforce that maybe younger employees are answering different than older employees, things like that. But we really didn't break that down or look at it that way. And it is very anonymous because it's not broken down by department or division. It's broken down by location. So when you have City Hall, like that's almost every department is in City Hall. So when you have City Hall responses, it's almost impossible to drill down what department or who it's going to be. And then when you have other, locations, there's quite a few people there. So it's really difficult to drill down who it'd be. And there's anyone in HR to figure out who the responses or who's responding. It's really just about general responses, general data, and what can we use to make a change in our work environment, a positive change.
Okay. Would you say the amount of responses are the same or higher, lower than last?
Then the 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can, I think,
Could I just make a point of order? Maybe I'm not understanding here. I thought the agenda item was about the remote work policy. Is there a
I
connection?
apologize. I bring that up because I think we brought this survey up when we got to this item last time. And seeing some of the results, again, I had employees reach out to me who wished to remain anonymous. But the work from home policies specifically and the survey sometimes go hand in hand when we don't get good amount of people answering surveys, sometimes that is a sign of people not happy.
So you were
that's
just tying those two together. Okay. I just didn't know if maybe I was reading the wrong agenda item or. Okay.
No, sorry about that. So, okay, I can go into a couple questions. So I guess the first question I have is, I read the policy that you sent me, and is there a requirement that children are not at home when someone is working from home?
The requirement is that you cannot substitute you cannot substitute remote work for childcare. So every situation is different in the sense of, if let's say someone's working from home and they have a spouse that's watching the children, the spouse and children can be at home because the spouse is watching them. An employee might have a high schooler. That high schooler is not going to childcare, and the high school is pretty self-sufficient. They can take care of themselves. So it's a pretty much case-by-case basis. We don't want people abusing the system. We don't want people actually watching their children. So in the policy, you're not supposed to be watching your children. You're supposed to be working just like you would in the office. It's not an easy thing to decipher. But from my perspective, I've heard some rumors that people think it's going on, but there's really no, evidence to say that, yes, it is occurring, that watching their children and not working at the same time.
Okay, so if kids are being seen in the background of a Zoom meeting, is that kind of being questioned at all?
Not at all. I mean, actually, I think it's great when you see a kid in the background. I mean, you kind of see in their family life a little bit. So I don't question it in the background. It's kind of lightens the mood, and then they get back to their job. I think we focus more on the output versus, what they're actually doing every minute of the day.
Okay. The reason I ask that is I have 3 children, and I know how distracting they are, and how when I'm at work and it's quiet, I'm more productive than if I'm trying to work at home with 3 kids. So I just want to make sure that that policy is being enforced. I heard some concerns of work not getting done on time and stuff like that. So I just want to make sure. Another thing that I brought up with you was how many people have the actual capabilities of working from home. Because I do worry too, again, going back to the survey, we had about, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my sheet here, a third of the people that can actually work from home. So what are we doing for the employees that don't have the capabilities to work from home?
So I believe we have about 950 employees, and 650 cannot because they're police, fire, public works laborers, DPW, parks laborers. For them, they've actually, I wouldn't say they're not ahead of the curve with remote work, but they've had flexible schedules like 4-10s, different shifts for a very long time. And it took the City Hall employees a long where we had summer hours, flexible schedules. So we have summer employees who work in the Parks Department, DPW, that have been working 4-10s with like 3-day weekends. that most City Hall employees have not done. So the employees that are police officers, firefighters, not much we can do for them to remote work. If you're working on the roads, not a whole lot we can do at this point. It's really a benefit for our City Hall employees, office employees who are able to do the work in the office and at their home. And it's a benefit to help recruit and retain those employees.
Okay. Thank you.
Alder Burnett.
Director Fultz, thank you for the information. Are there any city employees who are 100% remote?
I don't know for a fact if it's 100% remote. I think for the most part, it's between 1 to 3 days. I do think our IT department is probably the department that's closest to 4 to 5 days. And from some of the feedback I've gotten from staff, because we've talked a lot about IT and IT needs over the past 2-3 years, I've only heard like praise for IT and the response time. So that's an area where they've been probably working remotely the most, and the response has been very good.
Would you say that the typical, I can't say typical, but is it typical though to have 1 day remote work, 2 days? Like, kind of walk me through or talk me through a situation that you could consider typical if there could be such a thing.
Yeah, for sure. So HR department, we put on training for our supervisors before this policy was put in place. And really what it comes down to is we want to start out 1 to 2 days of remote work. And how we want that to occur is departments should have enough employees in the office to provide coverage for the public coming in. And typically that's probably the minimum is a third maybe, but typically you want like 50-50, 50 at home, 50 in the workplace. So it's usually like 1 to 3 days. And with the summer schedule, what happens a lot is the individuals that we end at 11:30 on Fridays. A lot of departments, half their employees will be working remotely that Friday morning and half will be in the office. And then they kind of rotate days throughout the week. So it's a little bit all over the board, but we try to have about 1 to 2 days remote and the rest in the office.
Are you aware of any municipalities in Brown County or in our greater community that have a remote work policy?
I believe De Pere does, and I believe Appleton has had a remote work policy. I think they're in Outagamie, but they've had a remote work policy for quite a few years, and we modeled ours after theirs around 2019, right before the pandemic occurred. We were trying to move towards remote work. So it's a policy that municipalities have put in place, and COVID kind of ramped it up a little bit.
Yeah. A final question. Have you had any comments, or has the mayor's office or the clerk's office, whoever, any comments from the disagree, or perhaps that they're having a hard time getting through? Because aldermen hear the comments. I've heard several. Like, has this risen to the level of consciousness at City Hall from the public comments?
No, I haven't heard comments of responsiveness. So I'd be very interested to hear like when it's occurring, what time of day, what departments. I would like to know that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll follow up with you on that one.
Thank
Alder
you.
Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. COO Falls. That's what I'll call you. So if any, some of the feedback that I'd gotten on, that I'd received early on, was that City Hall was unable to maybe be open or wasn't always fully staffed in certain departments for the public to interact. Would you say that was more attributed to COVID, or was that remote work? Is that corrected? General thoughts?
I think it was more COVID and the early stages of remote work, and for us to get used to it. I think now we have a better handle over remote work and our days in the office, days at remote working. So I think that was more early on when I've heard concerns about that.
Okay, so from your perspective, what you understand is our departments right now are accessible when they need to be to the public.
Yes, and there's always going to be missed calls, no matter what, whether we're working remotely or in person. But I haven't heard an excessive amount. I actually haven't heard any complaints, but that's probably because people just haven't told me about it. But I haven't heard it.
Yeah, and again, you're going to have missed calls, whether it's vacation, someone's out to lunch, whatever, but as long as our published posted hours for City Hall, are being staffed, that I'm a huge fan of remote work policies. They tend to work very well. We talk about research, that backs some of this up, and research actually shows that employees who are allowed to work remotely have a tendency to work more hours than if they had to come into work and work at a desk. Plus, they're happier, they have more flexibility. So I'm a huge fan, but I also believe in accountability, meaning that it should be monitored. And if it's abused, right, don't let one bad apple spoil the system for everybody else. So I have no problem with this. But again, recognizing that if there is an issue, that we should just make sure that our department heads are, kind of fully trained on how to respond to folks that might be taking advantage of policy. So, with that, I would offer up just to receive and place on file, unless there's a specific action that Alder Grant's looking for. But in which case, then I would just make that motion.
Before we entertain a second, I'm going to call on Alder Eck, who has her hand raised, kind of.
Yes, thank you, Alder Galvin. So I just have a couple clarifications. So are all the employees that have to sit at the counter, are any of those working from home, or you're saying some are, some aren't?
So you cut out a little bit. So did you ask all the employees that are at like up front and facing, are they working from home or not?
Are they not working from home? Are they working at City Hall? Are there some of those, and maybe you kind of alluded to that, but just to clarify, are some working from home and some working at the City Hall at the counter? So like they would be assisting customers face to face.
Yeah, so I think I can answer it this way. Every department's a little different in the sense of there's different foot traffic for different departments. And the individuals that need to have that face-to-face conversation with the public, they're either not working remotely or there is enough employees up front that they can rotate with who's answering or who is in person versus who is working remotely. And then one other option or caveat to that is most of our departments know when they have a really busy time, like the clerk's office right now. I don't think they have a lot of people working remotely because it's voting in an election. So they're definitely in the office right now. So a lot of departments know those busy times and then they'll work remotely less during those times.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question. Is there any corrective action that's been taken to make sure that city employees are available during work hours by both phone and email?
I'm not aware of anyone that has received corrective action, their accessibility because of remote work.
Okay, so there hasn't been a need for it, or you just haven't heard it that there's anything negative?
Yeah, at this point, I can't think of any off the top of my head. And I guess if there is any personnel issues I can think of, that's something we really shouldn't be talking about in an open session because it's a personnel matter with employees. But right now, I can't think of any.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Grant?
A question, when a phone call is going through, is it being forwarded to your cell phone?
Play is a little bit different, but for the most part, what we have is we have the capability of forwarding our desk phone to a cell phone if you have it, or we have the capability of using our laptops where we can take phone calls through our laptops. And the direction that we've been given to employees is to do one or the other, but to make sure that you are accessible that way.
And voicemail, I know like my voicemail at work pops through on an email. How do voicemails come through?
Same way, through email.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Alder Burnett.
Yeah, one final question for Director Faulds. Obviously, we've had this policy for some time, and just like any policy, the more you go along, you can kind of see where there may be holes or things that need to be clarified. Is there anything to kind of clarify something to improve it?
I think at this time, I would say there isn't. And one of the, things about COVID is we were working remotely without a policy. And I attended a HR conference. I think it must have been January or June of 2021, where we had a session on this, where they talked about the do's and don'ts of a remote work policy. So we kind of were able to draft it in 2020, kind of learn what to do, what not to do. And then we brought this forward in September. So we'll continue to look at it and update it if there are any changes, but we kind of got a kick at the cat before it was formally approved. So that I think helped us quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will second Alder Johnson's motion with the comments that I've always been concerned about the remote working. In my opinion, it seems to be working. I know that at the police department, at one time, officers or people in the administration that were allowed to flex their hours during the day, which was a huge advantage. I took advantage of it when I had one of those positions. Chief Falls have talked about city employees during the summer going onto a summer schedule, which is certainly an advantage for those individuals. I guess I would include that if they have anyone telling them that the rules aren't being followed, then either contact the department head or Chief Falls with those complaints. Because we really can't solve those here by trying to make rules that change the way people work, possibly 190 employees because one or two aren't following the rules. So I would just say, understand that if you're hearing complaints about employees not following the rules, I think the best thing to do is to take it to department head or take it to Chief Falls. If 180 or half of these individuals were all violating it and people were giving us evidence on that, I could certainly see about addressing this policy, but I think it's a good policy. I think it helps the city with recruiting. I think it helps with morale for those that can take advantage of it. And certainly, like it's been discussed here, there's a lot of the other 600 and some employees that have other advantages. And we don't hear anyone complaining about garbage guys getting out early on a Friday afternoon. Oh, look at those guys all leaving early. Well, so I mean, they're putting in the time that's necessary. So with that, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? That passes unanimously. On to item number 3, consideration with possible action on the immediate addition of neighborhood compliance inspector funded through inspection fees, contingency, or other possible sources. This was a item from Alder Johnson.
Yeah, I'll just make a motion to approve and then I'll speak to it if there's a second.
I'll second that.
So this is a conversation that I had with a couple of staff folks. I live a lot of our lower income census tracts, which is typically, represented by older housing stock and maybe a higher volume of neighborhood concerns. So whether you're talking about, oftentimes it can be, garbage complaints, it can be long grass complaints. It's obviously some housing stuff in there, including rodent complaints. And so where this conversation really started was a number of requests that I had with about doing neighborhood sweeps to make sure that we're properly communicating in a proactive manner with the residents in our areas where we have a high of reports of rodents, undesirable rodents. And so we talked about it. We talked about how they were really understaffed. To be able to fully, I guess, cooperate with those requests. And it's just into a conversation recognizing that they're understaffed entirely when it comes to these types of needs. It was an issue. And I'll let staff kind of maybe provide a better overview of this, but it's something that they're contemplating next year anyway as a proposal. But I requested that maybe we take this up sooner because I have needs and concerns in my particular district, and I know I'm not the only district. There are other districts that have these same challenges, but these are needs that really we're not serving our community very well if we allow it to wait, particularly if we have a way to address it right now. So that's why I'm asking for us to take this up right now. But again, I would defer to staff to maybe give a little bit better explanation over what their intent and strategy was and exactly what this position would do.
All right. Mr. Pappy or Steck Schulte?
I guess, thank you, Alder. I'll just provide a couple of opening comments, then turn it over to Mr. Pappy. He can probably provide more detail. Right now, the department generally operates with part-time positions, seasonal positions that we generally try to fill to help. We have been, for a variety of reasons, have been unsuccessful in recruiting those part-time positions, just for not finding candidates really applying for the positions. So we're already kind of in the mode of maybe trying to convert the 2 part-time positions into 1 full-time position as part of the budget process. So we were kind of working towards that as kind of our initiative as part of the budget process for this year. So then the communication came in from all. So we've certainly accelerated that. I think the other aspect of this is I think from a revenue generation standpoint, obviously that's not our primary objective with these positions. We're just trying to achieve compliance generally with rules on that, but the revenue that is generated by these positions evenly would largely help make up for the additional salary demands I think that would be required. In addition, for this year, we figure by the time that if the position is approved and by the time it is posted and hopefully hired, we'll be down for only 2 or 3 months for the year. So we don't think the impact will largely be covered by the salary that was already approved in the budget for those seasonal positions, as well as some of the revenue that would come in to cover any inspections on that. So we do believe it is kind of an expense neutral position in that regard. And we certainly do see the need. Obviously, not having those 2 part-time positions, there is a significant amount of inspection work that is not occurring that we would certainly like to see done, or conversely, that some of our full-time staff has had to go out and deal with, and on top of their regular workloads that this position generally would address. But for details, I guess I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Pappy if I could.
Sure. Go ahead, Bill.
All right, thank you. So on average, our department receives about 3,700 complaints per year. Of those, about 89% of those are handled and received by our housing and zoning department. We currently have 5 employees in that department, and they carry on average of a caseload of about 653 complaints per year. So what that does is it really taxes them in their ability to the amount of follow-up inspections that are required for certain complaints, as well as the proactive requests, whether it be rodents, whether it be neighborhood sweeps, things like that. By adding this second compliance inspector position, it'll help reduce that to around 544 complaints on average. So kind of gets that number down with a little bit more manageable. So when we have requests from alders, if there's rodent concerns at particular times of the year, we can be proactive with those. We can be proactive with neighborhood sweeps to kind of get out front of some issues, so those complaints don't escalate into a much more time occupying. Director Stetschulte noted our reinspection fees. Our reinspection fees have been working fantastic. Once again, it's not a revenue generator. It's meant to promote compliance and communication. But with this second position, it allows us the ability to follow up on cases where we are taking enforcement action on a much more frequent basis. So right now, with that large case volume that our housing and zoning inspectors receive, if they have a case that needs continuous follow-up because they're in a non-compliant state, they have to schedule that around handling all their other complaints and all their other needs during their day in that week. By adding this position allows us to allocate some of that time, so that way that compliance and those re-inspections can get followed up by that additional staff person. So I guess I'll entertain any questions that you have about our process, our inspection process, or what you're looking for.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Pappy?
Alder Galvin, just one.
Sure.
And this is actually, and maybe I jumped the gun a little bit with the motion, but when it comes to the funding, if there's, obviously, if it's not revenue neutral, we're going to have to identify a funding source Are you confident that you have enough funding in your budget right now with a combination of what you already have budgeted and additional revenue that would be generated through this role? Do you feel confident that it'll fund it through the end of the year, or do we need to talk about an alternative revenue source?
I think primarily, from what we just recently discussed here, that is going to be the case. It certainly depends on how fast we can attract a candidate. Qualified candidate, we can get them on, and the hiring process goes faster. Certainly, there would be the likelihood of someone getting on and starting hitting the ground sooner. But obviously, we have the ability to manage that in terms of when the start date for that individual would be. At this point, like I said, we know there's $14,000 available immediately from the two positions that have not been hired, in addition from the reinspection fees that are coming in. I can't remember, Mr. Pepe, do you remember what exactly what our approximate revenue is from reinspection fees from last year?
Last year in 2021, I believe we generated around $240,000 in reinspection fees.
And that was from way considerably beyond the salary cost, I think, of those positions generally. So at this point, we're fairly confident that we could control it and make it budget neutral for this year. But certainly going forward, we would certainly need to make sure that we're budgeting accordingly for future years outside of this year.
Yeah. Okay. When I submitted the communication, obviously I put the option of contingency on there. At one point I had started this dialogue with proposing as an ARPA funded role, which definitely evolved into this with your input. So I'm comfortable leaving the motion as is and not identifying another funding source.
I have some questions for Mr. Pappy. The current inspection process, is it complaint-based or is it proactive where for violations?
100% complaint-based right now, Alder Galvin. The only time we'll do a proactive is if we have an alder or mayor or we get a specific request for proactive, whether it be rodents or whether it be a specific neighborhood concern. But right now we're all complaint-based.
Would you even have the staff to be proactive other than on complaints only?
It would be very difficult in other tasks like reinspection fees, like reinspecting cases. Kind of suffer. So we get to it. It's just we're not able to get to it in as timely of a manner as I would like to in order to push compliance and get neighborhood issues cleaned up quicker. The more we're there, the more we can kind of push to make sure that those issues that residents are experiencing get corrected timely.
So if we had even more staff, we could be more proactive, taking care of these problems before people even really notice them in some cases, or before they harm.
In many cases, if we were proactive, there'd be a lot of work, a lot of work out there. But we own that's the advantage of being complaint-based. We'll focus on those complaints. But the other issue that we come to is if we receive a complaint on a particular property, let's say it's peeling paint, for instance, and the inspector goes out there and there's that same issue on the left and the right, that inspector will address those issues as well. So one complaint can generate a lot of volume of work depending on the neighborhood and depending on what that particular complaint is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say in support of this position, when I was on the police department, we worked hand in hand with the inspection department. They were a huge asset for us when we were running into problem landlords, problem rental properties, or just problem property owners. And they were actually able to solve more of the problems quick going through the process that they have. So I've been advocating for more staff for inspection for a long time. So no matter how we have to fund it.
Yeah, the proactive approach really hit to focus on education more. Alder Johnson brought up about our rodent issues and stuff, and really that comes down to education. The more we can educate our neighbors and our community on what not to do and how to eliminate, food, water, shelter, and how to take proactive steps and maybe removing or temporarily removing things around your neighborhood, that will eliminate the problem much more And I'll have a much more cost-effective approach to the city budget versus throwing dollars at traps or things like that.
Right. And not just rodents. I mean, possums, raccoons, skunks. These are all creatures that we like to see on Bambi movies and stuff like that. But in a city, they are a serious problem. Skunks being very rabid. And no one wants to find one underneath their porch when they're having a party. Possums, I've seen the problems with them, the same thing with raccoons. So, and a lot of that is because of the way people keep their yards and their outbuildings and things like that. And like you said, a lot of education can go a long way to curing some of these issues. So,
Correct.
Leave those possums alone, Bill. They're good.
Yeah.
They fear chickens.
They eat the rodents.
Yeah, well, they also eat my chickens, so I'm not happy about them. Anyway, that was a long time ago.
We're an equal opportunity rodent preventer.
There you go.
We respect all rodents in their right place.
Exactly. All right. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. Did you want to say something?
No. Just aye.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Any opposed? All right. That passes. On to item 4, update and discussion on the successor agreement to the 2020-2022 City of Green Bay and Green Bay agreement. Staff.
If we can go into closed session, we should do that.
Move to go into closed session.
Need a second? I'll
Second.
second that. All those in favor say aye.
Do you need me to read the language, Bill?
If you would, please.
Committee may convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.85, subsection 1, subsection E, Wisconsin statutes, for the purposes of deliberating or negotiating public employee contracts for competitive or bargaining reasons. The committee may thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85, subsection 2, Wisconsin statutes, to report the results of the closed session and consider the balance of the agenda.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. None opposed. So we'll go into closed session.
All right, Joe, I'm going to pause the recording and give me a minute to remove the attendees that don't need to be in closed session.
Sounds good. And you can include all the alders, include Mayor Genrich, Director Allenbecker, City Attorney Bungert.
Will do. We're recording.
All right. Go ahead, Jesse.
Motion to return to open session.
I'll second that. All right. And then we go to open session and vote on it, right? Okay.
So I believe we're in open session right now.
We are? Okay.
Yep.
All those in favor of going back into open session, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? That passes unanimously. I'll
Motion to
entertain
receive
a
and
motion.
place on file.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. On to informational. Operations report on employee compensation. Chief Falls.
I know it's been already a long meeting and we probably have a long night, so I'll try to be quick. This is more of an update, I think, for newer alders in the sense of just how our compensation works and maybe how we got to where we are. So each employee has 2 increases throughout the year. One's a cost of living adjustment that is set by the council, and one is a step increase that's based on performance. So you can see from, since like 2013, we've had usually a 2% increase every year. And then in 2017, 2018, we had that compensation study. So the compensation study was the first one done since like the 1980s. The goal of that was to bring us from, I believe it was like the 25th percentile. I could be wrong, but I think it's about that, up to the 50th percentile in wages in comparison to other public sector. So then, 2018, 2019, 2020, you'll see in the chart, we were pretty close to what the average was from one study from Carlson and Detman on the Fox Valley Public You got to kind of think about some other maybe other municipalities that might be at 3% that might have been going a little bit higher than us. So when we think about, I guess going forward, when you look at 2020, I'm gonna look at this, 2021, we had a 1% increase 2 years ago, and then this past year we had a 2% increase. So we have other municipalities that are maybe a little bit higher than that the past couple of years. We have started going and doing a market analysis, and the wages are presumably increasing as well. So our options moving forward really are, to try and have a higher cost of living adjustment to keep us competitive. What happens is when we have a cost of living adjustment that is 2 to 3%, it moves up our whole schedule for every position, all the wages, and it keeps us competitive. If we stay behind on that, or excuse me, if it's a lower increase, we start to fall behind from other municipalities. So it's important that we kind of keep track with that. So that's one option, to look at the cost of living adjustment for 2023. The other option is to do a full-blown market analysis. And then you'll see on the finance report, there was a proposal, for myself, to have another stipend for employees using ARPA funds. And the reason why that's on there is because we want to make sure that the council's aware that this is an option when we look at preparing our budget for 2020 tight funds. It would be a short-term solution to try from what we're seeing on a cost of living adjustment. There's really no proposal. We're not telling you to approve the stipend. We're just making sure that you're aware of it, because if you made all these decisions tonight or the next couple of months and then you can't use the funds for the stipend, you might be upset at us for not bringing it up earlier. So that's why it's on the finance agenda. And just so everyone's aware for our preparing for the budget cost of living adjustment, it's, some of the municipalities that are coming in are above 2%, and they're a little bit higher last year too. So you got to be cognizant of where our plan is so we can recruit and retain good employees. So hopefully that was brief enough.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
It's informational, Bill.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the report of routine personnel actions for regular employees? All right. Next meeting date is August 9th or August 23rd. We'll be
Move to adjourn.
And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Need a second? I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. 5 minutes?
5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.